All doing okay. All right. Good evening, dear friends. Welcome to another wonderful course, Decoding the Talmud. And the plan is to know the whole Talmud by the end of the course. We'll know the whole thing, the whole Megillah. So, all right, dear friends, let us get going over here with lesson 1, the Jewish people in the Talmud, and we'll start off with a little joke. You ready? I can't use all my Talmud jokes because we got 6 more weeks to go over here. An 11-year-old boy goes to the Talmud Torah, goes to the yeshiva, and it's his first time dabbling and studying Talmud. He's all excited. He's going to start learning Talmud, get a taste of how the logic works, all the excitement of it. Okay. And, all right, there we go. Come on in, Max. How you doing? So he's all excited. He gets to learn Talmud. He comes home. This kid's a bit of a smart aleck. It's cold outside like today. And he doesn't close the door. So his mom says, hey, Yankala, go close the door. It's cold outside. So the little boy says, and if I did close the door, it would be warm outside? All right. Little smart aleck there, huh? All right. Good evening, dear friends. And let us jump in to the world of the Talmud. And before we really get into the substance of tonight's class, I want to first speak for a few minutes, a little bit of an introduction, about the place that the Talmud holds on the Jewish people, in the Jewish consciousness. And I want to begin with a story in a video. All right, we're going to do a video over here.
March 3rd, 1240, was a Shabbat. But for the harassed Jews of medieval France, numbering as many as 100,000 souls, it was not to be a day of rest, but of unprecedented unrest. They were praying in their synagogues when the raid began. In cities and towns throughout the kingdom, agents of King Louis IX of France burst through the doors of Jewish houses of prayer and seized thousands of hapless prisoners. All the detainees were transported to Paris, where they were held in convents under strict guard to await their trial on accusations of grave crimes. For 3 long months, they languished in captivity until their collective trial began. Meanwhile, the Jews of the kingdom gathered continuously to storm the heavens on their behalf with fasting and prayer. 4 of the greatest luminaries of the French Jewish community, led by the highly respected Rabbi Yechiel of Paris, served as the prisoners' legal defense. Following the trial, the judges continued to debate the case for another 2 years, while European Jewry held its breath. Finally, in June of 1242, 24 wagons of tightly packed convicts rolled into Place de Grève, causing the Jews of France to emit a collective groan of horror. Place de Grève was a public square along the banks of the Seine River, notorious as the historic site of public executions, hangings, beheadings, and burnings at the stake. Throngs of Parisians lined the streets to enjoy the spectacle, while those of the Jewish faith remained hidden, terrified to venture from their homes. The prisoners had been found guilty and had been sentenced to extermination through public burning. The evil verdict was carried out with glee. But as they were consigned to the flames, there were no cries of agony or despair, nor was there a smell of burning flesh, because the prisoners were not people. They were books, thousands upon thousands of handwritten scrolls and codices, every copy of the Talmud that the king's agents could find in France, almost all of which had been sheltered in the nation's synagogues, had been arrested, put on trial, and condemned to public burning. The Jewish tradition was consigned to the fire that day, and as angry flames roared at their ancient wisdom, as their teachings rose as ash, and an inferno ingested their spiritual treasures, The Jewish communities of France were singed with grief and flung into mourning for their executed pages, for their martyred beliefs.
That's the story, huh? Pretty clever how they present it over there. Do you mind moving over one, Alan? Sure. One way. We got a couple here.
It's okay.
No, it's fine. I get a better view.
There you go. 1240. 1240 in France. Okay, now. Were you able to hear the narration? A little bit funny, huh? But okay, it goes through. All right, first of all, good evening, everybody. Hello, hello. Hello, Max. And hello to the Logans. Good evening. All right, welcome on board. Very interesting. King Louis IX of France is coming after every single copy of the Talmud. They make a public trial, which goes on for 2 years. And what they do is they destroy every single last copy they could find, which was very devastating for the Jewish community. First of all, France was the center of Jewish life and of Jewish learning in those years. If you wanted to study Torah, you're going to France. Rashi, the great sage Rashi, he lives in France. This was very, very tragic, and there's no question on a national level, we lost a tremendous amount of material. We have to realize, this is before the printing press. Every single copy of the Talmud is handwritten. We don't have a single page of the handwriting of Rashi himself. We have copies of his commentary, but an original document that Rashi wrote we don't have, probably because of these fires. Okay. At these fires, witnessing this public burning was a young man who was studying in yeshiva then. His name was Meir, but he grew up to be one of the great luminaries and leaders of European Jewry, known as Maharam of Rottenburg, Rabbi Meir of Rottenburg. And we're actually going to be talking about him, shameless plug coming up over here. We'll be talking about him in the next course. You see in your there you go. You see the bookmark is actually
Minutes, that's a record.
You're saying that's it. We're just going right at it. That's how it works in sales, No, so the next course, okay, is going to be a big history course. But one of the topics of next course is Jewish captives, stories of Jews in captivity, taken hostage. Rabbi Meir of Rottenburg was taken hostage, and he died in captivity. Fascinating history, and a very sad history. So we're actually going to be talking about him a lot. And we really learn a lot of the Jewish values of how to deal with hostage situations. A lot of it comes from him. Okay, so in any case, but he's then a young man studying in the yeshiva in his 20s. He's an eyewitness to this, and he writes a little poem, which is memorialized till today. We read his poem every single year in the synagogue on Tisha B'Av. We read the text from this young 20-year-old. This is what he read. This is what he wrote. And let's read it right now. We're going to go around the room. Start getting some text going over here. Alan, you going to help us out? Page 3. Page 3, text 1.
Text 1.
Page 3.
Oh, the bottom.
That's right, last 2 lines. Yeah.
Shed tears until it surged like a stream.
There you go, next page.
15?
Yep.
Okay. That will reach the graves of your 2 noble princes, Moses and Aaron, and the mountain of Hor, and I will inquire of them, will a new verse of Torah be given? Is that why your columns were permitted to be burned? My soul is astonished. Can edibles ever taste sweet to my palate? Now that I have wives, how they have gathered your treasure to the city square, like a penalty of a Jewish city that scraped Torah and burned the supernova treasure.
All right. And it goes on and on. It's a long poem. But what I want to point out to you is how dramatic he's being in this poem. I'll shed tears. They're going to surge like a stream. This is extreme stuff over here. My soul's astonished. And he says, can edibles ever taste sweet to my palate? We have to remember, this is not people burning. They're just books. I'm saying, as sad as it is, this is very dramatic, the way he's taking it. And once again, just to show you how dramatic this is, we read this poem every single year on Tisha B'Av, the annual day of Jewish mourning. We're on Tisha B'Av, it's a day that both holy temples were destroyed in Jerusalem. but it's a day where we remember, also the first, but we remember all big tragedies from throughout Jewish history. The massacres of communities, the loss of the land of Israel, big events we remember in different poems and different readings on Tisha B'Av. And one of them is this event, 1240, in France, the burning of the Talmud. That's pretty amazing. We're equating this to the loss of millions of Jews, loss of life, loss of the Jewish homeland, the holy temples. This is a loss on that level. Now, I share this with you because it highlights a little bit the place that the Talmud has on the Jewish consciousness. And I just want to spend a brief moment on this basic idea that we don't look at the Talmud here, by the way, as a volume of the Talmud. I'll show you, I'll give you a little tour of it soon. We'll get into it. But it's not just a record of old teachings, old stuff. There's a certain life to it. There's a certain, and it's not even a religious significance. In a certain way, the Talmud, the teachings of the Talmud, and the books of the Talmud capture the very essence, and it captures the soul of the Jewish people. It's a central pillar of the Jewish people. It captures the way of life of the Jews. Jews even created different chants, the way we sing Talmud. There's a way you learn Talmud. There's even hand movements. There's a whole vocabulary built around the study of Talmud. And historians even say that every single feature and quality and quirk, including Jewish humor, all ultimately comes from the unique style of learning, of logic, and just a certain flavor that comes from the Talmud. That's what they say. Probably the most iconic Jewish thing to do is for a Jew to sit down with a book, either by himself or herself, or in a group, and study. A Jew studies Talmud. This is a certain stereotype that, especially the men would leave the home in the evening. Although, by the way, Talmud study is not only for men whatsoever. This is definitely studying Torah is for every single Jew. But especially the idea of a man leaving the home in the evening to go to the local shul for a half hour or an hour and just sit down and study Talmud. It became a very, very iconic part of the Jewish life. In the Jewish world, in Jewish history, honor and celebrity status was never given to the great warriors. It wasn't given to the athletes, to the politicians. It was given to the Jew who could sit down and study Talmud. If you know Talmud, that was something to look up to. What did parents wish upon their children? To study the Talmud, to know it, to understand it. Let's read how King David captures, this sentiment. So Debbie, would you like to read this from Psalms, text number 2, page 5 in your books?
Had your Torah not been my delight, I would have perished in my suffering. I will never forget your precepts, for through them you preserved my life.
Once again, I think King David's being very dramatic over here. King David is an accomplished person. He had a lot of difficulty in life. But what does he say? If I didn't have your Torah, I would have died. I would be dead by now. I'll never forget your precepts, for through them you preserve my life. How am I alive right now? Because I have your Torah. Now, this is, again, very dramatic teachings which capture a certain feeling, a certain sentiment that no matter what Jews were going through, they found a certain comfort, a certain joy in sitting down and studying a little bit of Talmud. There's something magical to that. And one final thought on this point, from a historical perspective, not even from a religious historical perspective, Cecil Roth, which is a famous Jewish historian, he's a historian of Jews. I don't think he's Jewish necessarily. He's a Jew, but he's not coming from a Jewish perspective, right, Max?
Sure.
Cecil, I believe he's coming from a secular perspective, meaning just Jewish history from an outsider's view, even though he was a Jew. I'm pretty sure his books are not like a Jewish approach to Jewish history necessarily.
Yeah, I think it's more of a
Academic perspective. He was an academic. But look at what he writes over here. He writes that the Talmud is the reason how the Jews survived through everything till today. Let's read that. Text 3, page 6. Stuart, want to give us a read?
Home in a book. The importance of Jewish life of the Talmud is not by any means purely academic. It comprises the accumulated wisdom of the Jewish people over many generations. The period of its redaction coincided with the growth of independent centers of life in far distant regions, cut off politically and linguistically from the former nuclei. The Jewish people was about to enter on an entirely different phase of its being, in countries of which their fathers had never heard, in the face of difficulties hitherto unimaginable. But they possessed, to bring with them into their new existence, a code, not merely a religion or of law, but of civilization. The Talmud gave the Jew a fatherland which he could carry about with him when his own land was lost. And if he was able to maintain his identity in the course of the long centuries to come, under conditions such as no other people have ever been able to surmount, it is with the Talmud, above all, that the credit lies.
There you go. So the credit goes most to the Talmud. Okay, so there's something very, very powerful, something very gripping the Talmud has in the Jewish consciousness. And by the way, on anti-Semites too. Anti-Semites till today, they always gravitate to the Talmud, start hating on the Talmud, make up lies about the Talmud. That's always where it comes from, you know what I'm saying? Anti-Semites, in France, the Nazis also, right away they want to burn our books. They understand that these are not just books with a record of old law. There's something very powerful here. And a little bit of that power is what I want to try to explore with you in this course. Now, just this morning, I wanted to show this to you, just some interesting stuff. I went on actually Yad Vashem website. Yad Vashem has an unbelievable photo archive. And I found some old pictures. This is 1920s in Russia, according to the website. And these are just a bunch of boys from a little community with their teacher studying the Talmud. And even think about it, the whole idea that a Jewish child is raised, you sit and study Talmud. Like a 9-year-old boy, 10-year-old boy, 11-year-old boy, this is what they need to study? Like, what's in the Talmud? This is a little boy goes to yeshiva, they're studying Talmud. So this is 1920s Russia, and on another part of the world, all the way out east, look at this. This is an unbelievable picture. This is real color. This is the American government actually sent a photographer on I think a 5-year mission all the way out east, like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all the stans, to go and to do a survey of civilization all the way out east. He was out between 1905 and 1910. So this picture is from sometime between then, well over 100 years ago. And this is Uzbekistan, Samarkand. This is in Samarkand. This is a real picture. There's only 2 books. You have the teacher. Look at the way these robes that they're dressed in. And they're all standing around because they only have 2 books. And it's pretty amazing. This is how Jews are raised 120 years ago or so. This is in Poland right before the war. You see a very well-used volume of the Talmud with 2 boys, and this is right after the war. These are all survivors. This is in the DP camp. This is in the DP camp in Germany. In a DP camp in Germany, displaced people. They have 3 books and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kids. Unbelievable pictures over here. Like, this is the Jewish experience. They're all studying Talmud together. By the way, they're all on different pages. So these 2 boys are learning one thing, these 3 something else. Like they're not all even on the same page. I don't think it's a class. They're just 3 boys studying Talmud on the Yad Vashem website. So what I want to show you over here, so I found pictures of boys. I actually tried finding pictures of women. Studying Talmud of women was something which is also, it wasn't done as much. Admittedly, it was not done as much, but that's not good. Meaning, especially today, where it's easier to get access to wisdom, there's more access, and it used to be that women, like everybody, was working very, very hard.
The person on the far left, a girl.
I don't think it's a girl, but something looks a bit off. Like, wonder if yeah, it looks something looks digitally altered or something. But this is straight off the Yad Vashem website, so don't complain to me if it looks like there's any. But I don't think that's a girl. That's like that type of hat. I don't think a girl would wear that hat. A casquette.
Sure. More back.
Something looks a bit funny. Okay, in any case, I can't believe even Yad Vashem has the names. You know, it's a very well done archive. But in any case, like, look at this, little boys. This is what they're doing. There's no question, this is the quintessential Jewish experience. One of the top things what it means to be a Jew is that you sit down and you study Talmud. And the question is, number one, what we're going to explore today is, what does the Talmud contain? Number one, what the heck is in the Talmud? Number two, why is it so important to study? Those will be the two questions we're going to be exploring. And with that, that's the introduction. With those two questions, let's hit the ground running. You ready? All right. Number one, take a look in your books on page number 8. There's 10 useful facts here about the Talmud. Okay, I'm going to go through these 10 facts with you, and I have your volume of the Talmud. Actually, interesting. This morning, we had the morning class this morning, and I wanted to bring a volume of Talmud from my house. I forgot to. I'm like, oh man, 10 minutes before the class, I forgot to bring the Talmud, so I can't do show and tell. And I was like, you know what, I wonder if, do you think Jewish Federation would have a Talmud? So I caught Stacy Cohen right here in the hallway. And I was like, Stacy, any chance you got a Talmud set? She's like, well, we have a library, the upstairs room. I'm like, I don't know if there's a Talmud, but you're more than invited to go check. And lo and behold, set a Talmud. Although, I'm the first one cracking it open. I mean, good, nice crack this morning. Okay, this is Attracted to the Talmud. This is one book. And what it looks like on the inside is this. Lots of very busy page. Okay, what is it? Let's go through a little bit of what the Talmud is in these 10 facts. If some of this sounds like Chinese to you, I apologize and don't worry about it. Over the next 5 weeks, all this will make more sense. But let's start going through these 10 facts over here. Yes, so gesund, bless you. Number one, the Talmud is really a combination of two books, the Mishnah and the Gemara, with the latter styled as a commentary, elaboration, and analysis of the former. So there's really two books in here. The Mishnah, which by the way, you could buy a set of the Mishnah separately. So I want to just show you over here. This is the first page of the Talmud. So you got a nice big colorful designed opening word. The first few lines are the Mishnah. What's a Mishnah? We'll see in a second. A few lines in, there's a bigger, bolder word that says Gemara. Here's the Gemara, which is the commentary on the Mishnah. And one little Mishnah with 5, 6, 7, 8 lines could have pages and pages and pages of commentary. Easily 20 pages just on one Mishnah. So there's really two sections to the Talmud. Okay. Fact number 2. The Mishnah was composed around the year 200 of the Common Era in northern Israel. That's when it was finally put together. Fact number 3. So Mishnah is the earlier part of the Talmud. Okay, fact number 3. There are two versions of the Gemara. The first is the Jerusalem Talmud, which we call in Hebrew Talmud Yerushalmi. And the second is the Babylonian Talmud, Talmud Bavli. This is Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud.
The Mishnah is identical.
Mishnah is identical, but the Gemara changes based on what you got over there. And, okay, as we're going to see in a moment, Babylonian is the primary Talmud. We'll find out why in a later class. Okay, number 4. The Jerusalem Talmud was completed in the mid-4th century in northern Israel. The Babylonian Talmud was completed in the 5th century in Babylonia, which is Bavel, located, in Hebrew it's called Bavel, located in the region of modern-day Iraq. Until today, there's actually some very interesting and great Jewish sites in Iraq. The burial places of the tremendous sages of the Talmud are in Iraq. And there are Jews that make trips to Iraq to go visit those grave sites and the sites of the original yeshivas of the times of the Talmud. So that's interesting. Okay. Fact number 5. The Mishnah compiles the teachings of approximately 120 sages referred to as the Tanaim. Tanaim means basically the earlier sages, the sages of the Mishnah. Fact number 6. The Gemara compiles the teachings of approximately 800 sages referred to as the Amoraim. Amoraim means later sages. 800 of them. Okay. Fact number 7. The Talmud is divided into 63 sections or books referred to as Masechtot, which is tractates. So this is one tractate. Just this book is one out of 63. A lot of stuff. A lot of reading material over here. Okay. Fact number 8. Every tractate contains teachings of the Mishnah, but not every tractate features the teachings of the Gemara. You're following there? So Mishnah we got 63 tractates of, but if there's going to be the commentary and elaboration of the Gemara, not all of them have the treatment of the Gemara. Let's continue reading. Some tractates are treated in the Babylonian Talmud, some in the Jerusalem Talmud, some in both, and some in neither. Okay, number 9. The universal standard print of the Babylonian Talmud is the 19th century Vilna Shas, which includes several primary commentaries and fills 2,711 double-sided pages, which are called folios. That's a lot of reading material. So number 1, okay, so Talmud originally was just handwritten manuscripts until there came printers. Okay, and even printers, there's different forms of how the Talmud looks. But this look, with this exact pagination, which means every single page, this is standard. There's no other printing of the Talmud. You always follow this. This was made by the Vilna Press, which was owned by the widow and the brothers Rum. You know any Jews with the last name Rum?
Yes.
Really? R-O-M, M, or double M?
There's a well-known bankruptcy lawyer in the area.
That's so interesting. He's Rum? Look at that. Okay, wow.
Her husband, Marty. Yeah, Marty.
I never heard of anybody, but that's very interesting to me. Okay, I wonder if they're related. So it was a widow and her sons, they made this Talmud, which became the standard Talmud. Let me just show this to you. The middle column, that's the primary text of the Talmud. On the sides, we got 2 commentaries. The commentary of Rashi. Rashi is always on the inside of the page. And Tosafos. More commentary. And then, because they just couldn't help themselves, they put even more commentary on the little margins all around the page. So there's multiple, it's a very, very active page. This is called one page, double-sided. In the Western world, this would be 2 pages, right? But in Jewish standard, this is just 1 page. Side A, side B. So there's 2,711, which means well over 5,000 pages if you're counting our way of counting. All right. And by the way, just to show you a little bit over here, this volume of the Talmud, the actual tractate, this is a big tractate called Baba Metzia. I'll tell you about Baba Metzia in a second. The actual Talmud is not the whole book. The actual Talmud is 119 and a half folios, right? 248, something like that. Right, am I getting the lot? No, 238. 239 pages. This is the actual Talmud of the book. The rest is commentaries. So tons and tons and tons of more commentaries. Here in the back, when you're studying Talmud, you're always going to be jumping to the back of the book to see what the commentaries have to say.
I'm confused. Isn't the Talmud principally itself commentaries?
Oh, but we Jews can't help it. It's commentary upon commentary.
What
So
distinguishes what's
the Talmud, the Gemara is basically commentary on the Mishnah. But then Rashi is a commentary on that. Tosfos is a commentary on the Talmud and on Rashi. And it just goes nonstop from there.
the Talmud middle part is Mishnah and Gemara.
Right, Mishnah and Gemara in the middle. That's that. When somebody says Talmud, that's what it is. The middle part of the page. Okay, final fact number 10. Talmudic citations in English writings typically include 1, the tractate name, 2, a folio number, and 3, a letter indicating the folio side, A or B. For example, the citation, Pesachim 99b, indicates that the passage cited is sourced in the tractate titled Pesachim on the reverse side of its 99th folio. Unless otherwise specified, all such references refer to the heavily studied Babylonian Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud is the Talmud. Jerusalem Talmud, you got to say Jerusalem Talmud. But the Talmud is Babylonian, and not the Jerusalem Talmud, the study of which is more limited. Okay. Here's a funny story about this tractate. This tractate is called Baba Metzia. Okay. A little bit over 100 years ago, right before the revolution, the communist revolution, there was probably the world's last major blood libel against a Jew. There was a Jew who lived in Russia, not a religious Jew, I don't believe. His name was Mendel Bayless. He had a factory. And one Saturday, a non-Jew who worked in his factory was found dead, killed, I think hanging, in the forest behind his factory. Well, whose fault is it? Of course the Jew did it. And it very, very quickly, so Mendel Bayless got arrested, and it very quickly devolved from being just an attack and a trial against this Jew to a trial against Judaism. Does Judaism condone killing Christians? Or do we do that for religious reasons? And all these things. Then it turned into, does the Talmud look at non-Jews as less than and subhuman? And it got really, really messy and dirty really, really quickly. And all the stereotypes today that still go around in anti-Semitic circles about how bad the Talmud is, it was all in public trial then. And the Jewish community didn't just have to get a lawyer. This was a big deal. Big rabbis at the time. It was basically a trial against Jewish practice and against the Talmud. In any case, there was a Christian scholar who got up and said that he claimed that he was a professional in the Talmud, and he had a whole bunch of, he brought his whole case. The Jewish defense lawyer gets up for his cross-examination, and this was his opening question. He says, who was Baba Batra, and where did she live? And this professional Talmud said, I don't know. And all the Jews in the room burst out laughing, because Baba Batra is a tractate of the Talmud. Now, Baba in Russian means, right, a Baba, babushka, a bubby, grandma. So it's like a little bit of a catch. It sounds like you're asking about a person, but really it's tractate. So if he claims that he's a professional in the Talmud, and you don't know who Baba Batra is, that immediately disqualified him. So it's a good tactic. But the point is, right, what's Baba Batra? So what actually is going on in this? This is Baba Metzia. There's 3 Babas. Now, what does Baba Batra actually mean? Baba means section. Batra means last. There's 3 Babas. There's Baba Kama, first section, Baba Metzia, the middle section, Baba Batra, the final section. Because these are 3 major tractates, which are all about civil law.
Is that Hebrew?
Aramaic.
Okay.
Aramaic, yeah. It's not really Hebrew. The Aramaic that we use is like a blend a little bit of Aramaic, which the Chaldeans, by the way, still speak. Very interesting here, yeah. The Chaldeans speak Aramaic and also some Hebrew. It's like a hybrid language. Similar to how Yiddish became like a hybrid German and like a little bit of like our own mix of a language. That also Aramaic was kind of like that, like a Jewish version of the local language. So dear friends, with those facts under our belt, I want to really jump into the substance of today's class. What is in the Talmud? What is actually in these books? And what makes it so special? What's in there? The real question is, why do we need another book? What is the Jewish book? The Torah, 5 books of Moses. Like God gave us the book. More books? What do we need more books for? If God gave us law, if God gave us values, if God gave us direction, inspiration, He gave it to us. That's not good enough. We got more Jewish stuff? And who made that up? The rabbis made that up. What's wrong with what God told us? So what's going on over here that you got simple 5 books of Moses, it's really not that big, and all of a sudden you got big Talmud, 800 rabbis. Like, what's this book about? Well, what's this book doing more, and why do we even need it? It's also interesting if you think about it. In 1240, when the French burnt all the Talmuds, did they also burn the Torah scrolls? No, we don't have a problem with the Torah scrolls. They were religious. King Louis was a Christian. He was religious. He believed in the Old Testament. So the Torah scrolls I'm okay with. Only the Talmud I don't like. That's what he's going after. It's very interesting. So what is this whole idea that we have a Judaism, we have a religion, and we have the 5 books of Moses given to us by God on Mount Sinai, and then we got this whole other body of work coming along over here, big Talmud. What's that doing over here? So for that, we have to understand something about how Judaism works, and Jewish tradition as a whole, Jewish knowledge as a whole. If you look in the 5 books of Moses, does the 5 books of Moses actually reflect Judaism as we know it today? No. Quick no. And it's very interesting. The more you think about it, the more baffling it is. How much of Jewish practice, of Jewish awareness, and of just what we take for granted of what Judaism is actually either barely mentioned or not mentioned at all in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses. Just for an example, let's try to think. What are some of the most famous, well-known Jewish practices? Circumcision. That is in the Bible. That is in the Bible. That's in the Torah. What else? What's what's Jewish? Top 10 Jewish things.
Isn't fasting on Yom Kippur like one line of thou shalt practice self-denial?
Fasting, it does say you shall afflict yourself. Afflict yourself, which is, right. So afflict yourself on the 10th day. What's that? Yom Kippur. What else? Kosher. Which part of kosher?
No cheeseburgers.
No cheeseburgers. Doesn't say that in the Torah. Doesn't say that in the Torah. Period. You got something close to that? What else? What else is famous about Judaism? Shabbat. Which part of Shabbat? Let's choose something. Lighting candles. No lighting Shabbat candles in the Torah. No mention. Sukkot. That's mentioned, but all it says is you shall live in huts. Okay, so now you have a little bit. I wrote a list over here this morning. You ready? Hanukkah. Not in the Torah. Shabbat candles. Not in the Torah. Havdalah. Nothing. How to slaughter an animal for kosher. No directions how to slaughter. A mezuzah. We know what a mezuzah looks like, but the Torah, what does the Torah say? And you shall write these words upon your doorposts and upon the posts of your gate. Okay, first of all, what are these words? This line, this page, this book. Also, what does it mean to write on your doorposts? Just take a pen, start writing? My kids would love it if that's what a mezuzah was. Permanent marker, even better. But we know, no, that's not how you do it. There's a scroll, it looks like this, you put it here, you only write this, we know exactly what to write. Doesn't say that in the Torah. Shiva, to go to a Shiva home, to practice Shiva, not in the Torah. Nothing. Saying Kaddish, not in the Torah. The Ketubah, the marriage contract, not in the Torah. Bar mitzvah, I was waiting for somebody to say that. Bar and bas mitzvah, nothing in the Torah. And the blessings we make. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Nothing about blessings. So there's a very, very big just gap between the Judaism we know, Jewish practice, as well as also Jewish teachings, Jewish thought, the religion, the understanding of the religion, and what's actually in the 5 books of Moses. So what's going on over here? And the answer is, this split comes from here. This is the story. Jews come out of Egypt. A few weeks later, they march to Mount Sinai. God says, I'm giving you the Torah. They get 10 commandments. And from that day on, for the next 40 years, what do you think the Jews were doing in the desert for 40 years? Besides the occasional kvetch, the occasional wine. What were Jews doing in the desert for 40 years? They're studying Torah. Every single day, Moses gave a class and he unveiled every single day, slowly but surely, the entire Torah to the Jewish people. Just fun fact, the classes were optional. Interesting detail. A Jew that was not forced to go to the classes of Moses, only if he wanted to go. So it's an optional class, but every single day Moses is teaching stuff. And as we see, the problem is, if Moses is telling them the words of a verse, there's no detail. There's every single mitzvah in the Torah is barely said in one line, with zero explanation. So it says, you shall wrap these words, bind these words between your eyes and upon your arm, and the only description we have in Hebrew, in the Torah, is the word totafot, which is a meaningless word because it's the only time that word appears in the whole Torah. Any word that appears only one time in a document, it's impossible to know what it means. Right, we know that today. You try understanding old, there's even one language of the ancient Egypt that we still didn't decipher. And the problem is, if something is found multiple times and you know what the other words mean, by context you can start figuring it out. A word that appears only once is basically an impossible word to know. Even in English, what's the English translation for the word totafot? Phylacteries. That's pretty helpful, no? Oh, phylacteries, now I know what they are. It doesn't say that over there. So we as Jews believe that there's really two parts of the Torah. There's the written Torah, which is 5 books of Moses. Exactly what it says there. Then there's something called the oral Torah. The oral Torah is everything else. Well, where does that everything else come from? So the way to understand that everything else, well, what just happened over here? Okay. The way to understand that everything else, I want to go through that with you. But there's two parts of the Torah. There's the actual Torah, the Torah scroll we have in the synagogues. And then there is everything else, which supplements and explains. And the Talmud basically is a recording of the oral Torah. But what's the oral Torah? So there's three compartments or components to the oral Torah. So number one, we have the written Torah. That's number one. Torah in general is 4 parts. Part number 1 is written Torah. 5 books of Moses. That's easy. But then we have 3 categories, 3 sections of the oral Torah. What's oral Torah? The first section of oral Torah is called received. So we have the written Torah, and then we have the received oral Torah. What's received? It's very simple. Imagine you're sitting by Moses' class, and he says, you shall write these words upon the doorposts of your home and of your gates. And what are you, of course, going to say? Raise your hand and say, Moses. Probably say Rabbi Moses, right? Reb Moses. What are you going to ask him? How do you do that? And what's he going to say? He says, oh, I'll tell you. Ah, where did he know that from? He said, God told me. Yeah, let me explain to you what it means. There's a whole, number one is Moses himself spent 40 years explaining to us the words of the Torah. Whatever Moses told us, that is called received oral Torah. It's not written down in the actual 5 books of Moses, but from day one we had that. For example, it says in the Torah, you shall take an etrog on the holiday of Sukkot. What is an etrog? A watermelon? No, so he explained right there. What is it? Oh, it's this specific species of fruit. Now we know it's received. Let's read then the words of the great Maimonides. So he'll walk us through over here. Text number 5, we're skipping around over here a little bit. Text number 5, page 13. David, we're up to you, correct? All right, whenever you're there, give us a read.
Written and oral. All of the commandments that were given by God to Moses at Mount Sinai and recorded in the 5 books of Moses were presented to Moses along with their detailed explanations that were not recorded in those books. The Torah itself refers to this in its statement, I will give you the tablets of stone and the Torah and the mitzvah, Exodus 24:12. In this context, the phrase the Torah refers to the written law. The phrase the mitzvah refers to the explanation of the written law. God commanded us to fulfill the Torah in accordance with the mitzvah. It is the latter instructions that we refer to as the oral law.
There we go. The Torah itself says that God gives us the stones, the Torah, and the mitzvah in the singular, the mitzvah. And that word, mitzvah, literally means what? Usually when you use the word mitzvah, it means all the commandments. But just the word mitzvah means what? What was that?
Good deeds.
That doesn't mean good deeds. It means commands, or like what I told you. So I gave you the Torah, and then I gave you instructions. Oh, that instructions is all the oral teachings given to us by Moses. So received is what we heard directly from Moses, and Moses says, I heard this from God. Again, not in the Torah, but this is part number 1 of the oral Torah. Now, just to call it the elephant in the room, if it's the oral Torah, why is it written down? All right, next week. Right? If it's oral, it's meant to be oral. Right? Okay, all right. But this is part number 1. We have a whole body of details and of understanding which has been passed on through the generations. We know what an etrog is. There was never one time in Jewish history where we're like, oh, we don't know what an etrog is. Maybe it's a pomegranate. There's never one time in Jewish history where people didn't know what tefillin looked like. This is what tefillin look like. How do we know that? How is there that unanimous understanding? We received it from Moses, even though it's not written down in the 5 books of Moses. This is part number 1. This is part number 1 of the oral Torah. Okay. Ready for part number 2? Part number 2. Part number 2 is called derived. Derived works like this. God warned Moses on Mount Sinai that the Torah, the written Torah, and even the received details are not going to be enough to fill in every single possible crack and question and new development in the world, which will pose new questions, new developments, which will challenge any premise within the world of Jewish law. There's always going to be a new what if. Always going to be a new detail, a new angle to a question. Or maybe some new technological development, which all of a sudden poses a brand new question, which talks to Jewish law, but we don't actually, it didn't speak about it. For example, genetically created meat, genetically created bacon. Is that not kosher? It's not bacon, but it actually is bacon. But it's made in a lab, not from an animal. Now, there's no answer to that question in the Talmud or in the Torah. Moses didn't come and tell us the answer. That is what we call a crack. There's a gray space. We don't have an answer here. So God gave Moses a toolbox. We received this from Moses. It's called the 13 tools of derivation. There are complex tools to use, where God says the answer is there in the Torah. The answer is there in whatever I told you. But you need to take this new question you have, take any precedence, any information you already have in the Torah, use these 13 different tools of derivation, and try to find the answer in what you already have. We can't go through all of them and understand how they work logically. But this is a whole nother field. We have to derive from precedence, from what we have, and apply it to new cases. Lots of examples for this. But this is the way it works. Anytime there's a new case, all throughout history, for the past 3,000 years, we're always looking at what we have to try to apply a detail to a new area. I'm going to give you an example for this in a moment. Right now, I'm not going to give you an example, so it's a little bit harder to appreciate this concept. But the way it works is that the Torah itself, it's there in the Torah, tells us that anytime there's a new question, and the answer is not clear, because it's not clearly in the Torah, and it's not clearly in what we know as received law from Moses, you got to derive it. Now, who derives it? Only a Jewish court or a great sage. They are the one given the task of deriving new law. And it's in the Torah that this is what you got to do. Let's read text number 6. Straight from the book of Deuteronomy. Give us a read, Jimmy.
Number 6.
Text 6, page 14.
Legal authority. If, regarding matters of dispute within your local courts, the case is too baffling for you to decide, be it a controversy over blood, civil law, or lesions, you must rise up and send to the supreme judge in that area. You should inquire, and they must inform you of the correct verdict in the case. You must carry out the verdict that is announced to you, observing scrupulously all their instructions to you. You must act in accordance with the instructions they give you and the ruling handed down to you. You must not deviate to the right or to the left from the ruling that they announce to you.
So the Torah itself says there's going to be new questions which the Jewish people don't have an answer. What do you do then? You go to the court, and whatever the court says, that becomes binding Jewish law. Okay, this is number 2, the derived law. This is a very dynamic part of Judaism. Anytime any new question comes up, either it's clear or we have to derive it. Who derives it? Got to go to Jewish court. The great sages will put on their thinking caps, figure out how to apply what we have to this new, and in that way keep on teasing out and expounding upon what we have in the Torah. That's number 2 of the oral law. So we have written, received, derived. Number 3 is a very interesting category. It's called legislated. It's also in the Torah that the sages, the leaders of the time, and really the Sanhedrin, has to be the Supreme Court, has the ability, has the authority given to them by God to legislate new legislations in Judaism, which we call rabbinic commands. Why do they do this? Either to enhance Judaism, to promote proper observance of Torah law. So there's a few different reasons. But any time there was seen as a need in a generation to create a new Jewish either celebration or a new do or new do not, it was legislated. Now, there's a lot of checks and balances of how this works. It's not like a free-for-all. It's not like I could say, you know what, I'm a rabbi, I'm going to legislate a new mitzvah in Judaism. And now you all have to listen to me. That's not the way it works. It's a very, very serious thing. It's not if no one rabbi could do it. There's no executive orders in Judaism, right? One guy signs a piece of paper, I decide this is what's happening now. Even Moses couldn't do it. It has to go through the court process. You got to vote on it. But there is a big part of Judaism called legislations. For example, what's a good example? For example, Shiva is not written in the Torah. It wasn't received from Moses. And Shiva is not either a derived law. Shiva is a legislated Jewish practice. Hanukkah is a legislated Jewish practice. Purim is a legislated Jewish practice. Washing our hands for the Hamotzi is a legislation. So every single detail of Judaism, you could always point to where is this coming from? Is it written? Is it received? Is it derived? Or is it legislated? I want to give you an example. You ready for? We need an example. You ready for an example for this? We need an example. Let's take a mitzvah and let's actually see how it actually plays out, where it came from, the evolution or the development of that mitzvah. Let's take a mitzvah we all know, and it's coming up. Hate to stress you out, but we're about 75 days away from the first Seder. Start freaking out. Okay. What's the mitzvah of the Seder? Eat matzah. Okay. The mitzvah of eating matzah is actually a mix. It's dynamic of all four of these categories of Torah. It's written, it is received, it is derived, and it's legislated. Let's see that happen. What's written in the Torah? Text 7. Okay. Lewis, text 7, page 15.
In the first month, on the 14th day of that month, in the evening, you shall eat matzot.
There you have it. First month, which is the month of Nisan, 14th day in the evening, eat matzot. If you're sitting in Moses' class, you read this, and he teaches you this verse, what's your question?
What's matzah?
Oh, there you go. What in the world's matzah? He tells you what's matzah. What's the next one?
How much?
How much? That's a simple question. Is a crumb okay? 1 matzah, 3 matzahs, eat till you drop. What are we going for over here, right? We got to know what to do. Okay. Very good. Written is the bare bones of the mitzvah. Mitzvah to eat matzah on this night. Moses came and told us how much. Received is how much. How much? The official size is the same volume as an olive. An olive, not an American olive. A good old Jewish olive, which is heavy and thick and juicy and zaftig. It's a little bit bigger than the volume of a kernel. Well, we follow today the size of an ounce, which is larger, but it's a safe amount. If you could get the same volume, an ounce, which is a little bit over, a drop over, a good old Israeli thick big olive, that's the size we eat. Okay. How do we know that? That's received. Not in the Torah, that's received. Okay. Then all of a sudden, after the Jews are out of the desert, Jews all of a sudden, as part of their world travels, because we love moving locations a lot, we discover that people make flour out of other stuff, like rice and millets and oats. In the desert, all they know about is, I don't know, the 5 grains, the basics. All of a sudden, there's all these other creative flours. Can you make matzah out of rice flour, out of millet flour, out of oat flour? The problem is, it's not there written, and we didn't either get a communication from Moses. So what's the answer? So a rabbi can't wing it like, I think the answer should be this. You know, some people think the Talmud is that. Bunch of rabbis arguing about their whims. I think this. You think that. Like, no. These are not what I felt like because I woke up this morning on the right foot or the left foot. We're trying to derive law with very rigorous tools. So what's the answer to that? There's no answer. Oh, but if you had the tools of derivation, you could find the answer. Okay, I can't go through the whole depth right now. Maybe in another half hour, we're done the class. If you guys want an encore, I'll share with you how we learn it out. But they derived, using one of the 13 tools of derivation that come to us from Moses, that you could use other flours. It doesn't have to be from the major grains, but it needs to be a flour that has at least some level of gluten. It needs to be able to ferment and rise. If it's a flour that does not ferment and rise, no gluten, can't be used for matzah. Now that wasn't made up, out of the hat. I think this. It was derived. It was actually, they found it in the written law. It's not written explicitly. You got to have the right tools, right excavation tools to know how to find it. But it's there. So, oats, certain oats, depends how they're treated, have a tiny amount of gluten. Oh, then it's good enough. So people who are gluten-free eat oat matzah. So little gluten, it doesn't hurt the person who's gluten-free, but it's enough gluten that Torah says you're allowed to use it. Rice, no gluten. You can't make matzah out of rice flour. So, that's derived. What's legislated? Matzah is also legislated. How do you eat matzah at the Seder? How do you eat it? Reclined, right? One of the 4 questions. You eat it reclining, right? Where does that come from? That wasn't written in the Torah, wasn't received from Moses, wasn't even derived. It was legislated by the sages. At one point, they felt that to enhance the experience of the Seder, not just should we speak about how we're free people, but it should be part of the actual experience of how we behave on the night of the Seder. And they legislated that when you eat the matzah at the Seder, you should recline, because back in the old times, don't ask me why they thought it was a good idea, but rich people, aristocratic people, would eat reclining. So the sages are like, all right, start reclining, which honestly was always a very uncomfortable thing to do by the Seder. Not anymore very popular, but we do what we got to do. Okay, I guess back in the day, it was a good thing to do. But the point is, look at this. One mitzvah in the Torah, which is written in the Torah, is actually contains ingredients from all of them. Written, received, derived, legislated. And the real truth is, every single mitzvah in the Torah, from the top 10, from even do not kill, I mean, every single mitzvah in the Torah is dynamic and includes the recipes from all 4 of these. There's not a single mitzvah in the Torah. Well, some are not written. Some come later. But generally speaking, Judaism is a mix. These are not isolated different genres, different chapters. It all comes together. Written, received, derived, legislated. It's always coming together to create one whole Judaism. And the Judaism we know of today is the sum total of this all thing. The written 5 books of Moses and these 3 categories, received, derived, legislated. Now, one more point before we move on from this. I just want to share with you something. 3 years ago, a bunch of you were there. We did a course called Judaism Decoded, the evolution of Jewish tradition. The whole course, 6 weeks, was going through these 4 categories, going through each one of them in depth, and especially going through the polemics. This whole model, there's a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's very suspicious, this whole model. Oral tradition, Moses told you stuff, it's not written down, rabbis get to make things up. Like, sounds a bit fishy, no? So there's lots and lots of questions, which are legitimate questions, about this whole model. If it was oral, how do you know it's true? Maybe the message got forgotten along the way. Lots and lots of good questions. Even the idea of rabbis arguing. Is it divine? Is it from God if rabbis are arguing about stuff? So we did a whole 6-week course really going in depth into the inner mechanics of this system. But so I'm just saying, I just squeezed into a half hour a massive topic which we could spend a full 6 weeks really properly going through. So if it's a bit overwhelming, yeah, it is. So don't worry about that. And if you guys want, at the end of this 6 weeks, if you want to do a 6 weeks of Judaism Decoded to really explore this whole model from a deeper level, all right, you let me know if we want to sign up for another 6 weeks for a whole another layer of exploration. I actually think that was one of our most favorite courses. Remember that, Elkie? And the Logans were there, right? That was a very, very good course. Max was there. All right. This is Judaism. Judaism is unbelievably dynamic, and it comes together alive with these 2 components. Written Torah, the original source code, and all these 3 layers which really make Judaism what it is. Now, I want to go through the timeline with you. Jews are standing at Sinai. They get the written Torah. By the way, they didn't get the written Torah in one fell swoop. Huh? One fell swoop. And they don't get it in one shot. Moses is slowly teaching them verse by verse, introducing the Torah to the Jews verse by verse. Okay? So, first 40 years, at the end of 40 years, the Jews finally get their final Torah. And by the way, right before Moses dies, he writes 13 Torah scrolls, the original 13 Torah scrolls. He gives 1 to each tribe, and 1 was in the Holy Ark. What does Spielberg show was in there? Dirt, dust, I don't know what. There was a Torah scroll in there. Okay, that's it. That's what was that?
Was the Raiders of the Lost
Yeah. So it's not dust. There was a Torah scroll kept in the Holy Ark. Okay, meaning it's just like in our shul. Shul or a temple has a ark, the Aron Kodesh, with a Torah scroll. That was what it was in the Holy Temple. Okay, same thing. Received. When does received happen on the timeline? In those same 40 years, simultaneously. Jews are getting received Torah from Moses as he's teaching them the verse. He gives them verse and explanation right away. Here's a verse about mezuzah. Now let me explain to all the details about a mezuzah. It's happening right away. Derived happens all throughout Jewish history, including today. Derived is a very dynamic, ever-growing body of Jewish knowledge. Most of the work was done before today. But even today, there's a brand new case in medical ethics, who knows what, food, technology, everything. And all of a sudden we have a space in life that the Torah did not tell us yet what to do over here. We need to derive it and apply it to a new case. But when did it start? When did derived law start? What would you say?
Probably in the desert.
In the desert, right away, day one, which means Torah was beginning the process immediately. Derived, secular, and in the world of academia, they split up Jewish history as old original Judaism and then something called rabbinic Judaism. You ever heard of that? Yes. It's like, oh, in the Talmud, rabbinic Judaism begins. And that's a very big misunderstanding of how Judaism worked. Which basically they're like, okay, there's the Judaism from Moses, then the rabbis come 1,000 years later and start messing everything up and making their own chalent out of it. No. Derived starts right away. Because right away there's questions in the desert. And Moses says, I don't know. God didn't tell me what the answer is. God, what's the answer? Well, if I didn't tell it to you, I didn't tell it to you. That's where the next step comes in. I gave you tools. God wants us to find his answer, but using our own efforts. That's the ride starts in the desert. And it never stops. Legislated does not happen so much anymore, because to really legislate something for the Jewish people, you need a Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin is basically gone now for 1,500 years. Big topic for another day. So we don't really have the power today anymore to make real legislations. The last real big legislation was about 900 years ago against polygamy. When it was, even though the Torah allows a man to marry more than one wife, doesn't promote it, doesn't recommend it, but it's allowed, not forbidden. It was the great leaders of only Ashkenaz legislated against it. Okay, but when did the first legislation start? Too bad.
And the Sanhedrin first convened?
Moses. Who made the first legislation of Judaism? Again, the rabbis started making up new parts of Judaism. Moses was the first one, which means it's fascinating. God is speaking to him on a daily basis. God spoke to him this morning, God's going to speak to him again tonight. And he's still making up stuff. What's going on? Because God mandated him that. God said that's how Judaism works. I give you some stuff written. I give you some direct communication, which is received. Some stuff you need to figure out the answer yourself. And some stuff, when you feel there's a good reason to legislate something, every single generation's court should do that. So what were some legislations of Moses? Shiva is a legislation from Moses. It's not written, not received, not derived. Moses legislated it. Reading the Torah on Shabbos. Reading from the Torah scroll publicly on Shabbos comes from Moses. So Judaism, in its entirety, starts from day one, and it's still ongoing till today. So it's a very dynamic system, bringing the written Torah and the oral Torah together, and these different components of the oral Torah, received, derived, legislated. They're very dynamic. They're constantly intertwined with each other, and the process began with Moses. One final question for you. One final thought as we conclude this big idea of the class. Take a look at text 8 in your books. Text 8. Page 16. This is a verse from Exodus, right by the story of the giving of the Torah. And Elki, we're holding by you.
If you listen to my voice and carefully observe my covenant, you will be a treasure to me from among all the nations. All the people responded in unison, and they proclaimed, all that God has spoken, we will do.
God said, I want to give you the Torah, and if you listen to me, if you take my Torah, you will become a treasure amongst humanity. And God offered the Jews, do you want this? I'll give you a Torah, and you'll be the treasure, the chosen people, a light unto the nations. And the Jewish people say, yes, we will do. Here's my question to you. There are 4 components of Judaism. When God told us and offered us, I want you to be, I'm going to give you a Torah, I'm going to give you my words, and you'll be a treasure. And the Jews agreed to that. Which of these 4 parts are part of that? This is called the covenant. Which parts of this are part of the covenant? So let's go through them. The written Torah, is that part of the covenent? 5 books of Moses?
Yes.
Yes. Received, what would you say?
Yeah,
Why?
it's already said in my voice.
My voice, and he's saying he didn't tell us directly, and it's not written down, but he told to Moses to tell us. What about the derived? The details we'll have to uncover on our own later on. Is that part of it?
Yes.
Yes, why?
The tools are in the Torah.
Because the Torah tells us to go to the rabbis whenever we're in doubt about a case. So that's a commandment there. It's actually one of the 600 commandments. When you don't know what a command is, go find out. And legislated, is that part of it? Legislated is also in the Torah. It's those same words. When a court mandates the Jewish people to do something, it's not a recommendation. If it's voted upon, it becomes law, binding law. Now, we don't do that because we like the rabbis. Oh, the rabbis, that's a good suggestion. I think I'll do that. Like listening to your dietitian. It's not a good recommendation. This is the power of God that gave them the authority to come and say that. So this, it's all four which come together. The dynamic, this four-part team that comes together, and all together, this is the covenant of the Jewish people. When we have a Jewish tradition, Jewish teachings, Jewish law, Jewish practice, it is all four of these coming together. The first part, written, is written in the 5 books of Moses. But 5 books of Moses is bare bones. You got the core there, you have the original source material, but you don't have the covenant. You don't have the picture of Judaism. And that's where the Talmud comes in. The Talmud is the official, authorized record of Judaism as a whole. Written, received, derived, legislated, as it all comes together, guiding a Jew, and the whole process that brought this dynamic, all recorded here in the Talmud. So Talmud is this official record of this covenant, and that's what makes it so special. This is Judaism. This is it. And in a way that the 5 books of Moses, you got to learn the 5 books of Moses. But if you want to see how it all comes together in a way that we could study and access it, and not just the final line, the Talmud brings you behind the scenes, the entire process of development. Where does every single detail come from? If something is derived, how is that derived? It's all here in the Talmud. Open source for every single Jew to have access to. And this is our covenant to God that we agreed to on Sinai. So when a Jew holds the Talmud in their hands and studies the Talmud, it is not just a book of instructions. It's not just a book of wise teachings. This is the covenant we have with God. This is what makes us the treasure amongst the nations that God promised us we're going to be. This is it. And that's really the power of the Talmud. Okay, so now we know what the Talmud is. And if you just say, well, it's, I don't know, Jewish traditions, Jewish teachings, it's cheap. You have to understand this whole system. This is a dynamic system, and we're going to see this system come alive in the future classes. We really start getting our feet wet with real substance of Mishnah, Talmud, and we'll start really, really seeing it come alive. But this is what it is. Okay, what's in the Talmud? Talmud has everything of Judaism, more or less. But it's split into 2 sections. Now, it doesn't ever tell you when a section begins and when a section ends. But generally speaking, the Talmud is about 3/4 or a little bit more than 3/4 a discussion of law. What's Jewish law? Jewish law is everything. You know, when we speak of law, here we go. I want to show this to you. About 3/4, and really more than 3/4, is called halacha, Jewish law. 1/4 is called agadita. I'm going to tell you what agadita is in a moment. Jewish law, what do people think of law? The way we think of law, you know, in the Western world, is what's law? Laws are there, number 1, to prevent you from harming somebody else. Number 2, what's your obligation to society? Like paying your taxes, which is very exciting. And social interactions, right? Cut your lawn, don't like, meaning just basically, how do you be a healthy, upstanding member within your larger society? That's usually what we think of as law. But in Judaism, law is much larger than that. Torah law also speaks of our religious obligations to God. Prayer, all that other type of stuff. Lots of behaviors that don't affect other people at all. For example, kashrut. Yeah, it's a good example. There you go. Yeah, you got a cow. Or, just a fun little example, one of the first things in Jewish law, how do you get dressed? I mean, how do I get dressed? I know how to get dressed. Torah law tells you how to get dressed. Which hand do you put in first? What, really? There's laws about that? Yeah, there's laws about that. There was an emperor, and I wish I had the chance, I wish I remembered to look this up before the class. There was an emperor who was very fond of the Jews, and his ministers and advisors hated it. So they always tried slandering the Jews and showing how. So at one point, his ministers brought to the emperor this teaching. Like, look how petty and stupid the Jews are. So pedantic. Like, you literally have laws, how to put on your shoes, which shoe to tie first. You put the right foot shoe on first, then you put the left shoe on second, then you tie the left shoe first, and then you tie the right shoe. They're like, you think these guys are serious? This is like a legendary story. I don't know if it actually happened, but the story is that the emperor said, like, I find that so meaningful. Like, even in the way they get dressed, it's a religious and godly experience. Okay, I guess there's two ways to look at it. You could be cynical, you could say that's beautiful. But, there's this, every detail of life, the Torah is teaching us and guiding us how to do it in the right Jewish way. Special days on the calendar is a big part of Jewish law. Agricultural practices is a major topic in Judaism and Jewish law, and worship done in the Holy Temple. And finally, ritual purity and impurity, which is a very big and difficult concept. Laws of purity, which, by the way, don't apply so much anymore today. It really only applies in the times that we have a Holy Temple standing in Jerusalem. Okay? So there's 3/4 is law, and not just dry law. It doesn't just tell you do this, don't do that, in this case do this. It's the whole development, the evolution, the behind the scenes, how we get to these laws, and what's the inner science behind these laws. 1/4 is called Agadata. Agadata is everything else. Like, the word Agadata comes from the same word as Haggadah. What does Haggadah mean? Story or telling. So Agadata is Jewish values, Jewish thought, Jewish philosophy, Jewish wisdom, and very often it is communicated through stories and parables, which is why it's called stories. It's always very, very colorful. It's very laid-back reading material. Talmud in general is not reading material. You can't read Talmud. It's like rigorous, heavy study. Okay. That's basically what's in the Talmud. That's a very basic, so it's 3/4 law. It's primarily an overview of law, and that's what's really given the in-depth treatment. And then a quarter about is Agadata. We have about 15 minutes left, and I want to right now get to maybe the most important point of the class, which is why in the world do Jews study this? Why do Jews study this? You will not catch an American citizen sitting on the plane, and he pulls out from his backpack a big, thick book of law. What are you reading there? Oh, these are old rulings, and how do they call them? When there's papers in the Supreme Court,
Briefs?
Not the briefs, when they respond back.
Dissents.
What was that? The dissents. Oh, I'm reading dissents from the 1840s. Why are you reading it? You're a lawyer? No. You're a judge? No. You got a case that's connected? No. It's an American citizen. I want to just know a little bit more about the law in my country. No, you won't catch anybody like that. If somebody's reading law, it's because it's their job, and they're only reading because it's relevant to what they need to know. But Jews have this weird thing that we study Talmud. And one thing I can tell you about Talmud is that it is extremely unpractical. If you want to look for something practical, you got the wrong book. Now, I'm not saying nothing is practical in the Talmud. There's so much practical stuff over here. But if you're going to try to study Talmud, saying, I want to get Jewish wisdom, I want to have stuff which is going to enhance my life, I promise you, you're going to be very turned off by studying Talmud. I actually got a call a few years ago. A Jew living here in the community calls me up and says, Rabbi, I have an entire set of the English Art Scroll Edition Talmud, which is a very high-quality English version of Talmud. It's a very expensive set. Costs close to $2,000. He's like, would you like it? Can I donate it to Chabad? I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm coming over now. So I went over to his house. He's like, just take it off my bookshelf. I'm like, share with me. What's the story here? He says, well, I'm a Jew. I was interested in maybe studying a little bit of Judaism. Someone told me, Judaism is in the Talmud. So swipe the credit card, got the whole set. He said, I tried opening up page number 1 of the first tractate. I'm done. This is not helping me out over here. It's just confusing. You're breaking my head open with questions of legalities. You could open up any page of Talmud, especially these classic pages of the Talmud. And you're going to start reading a case of the Mishnah. And the Talmud is going to split it open in a way you never even imagined you could split open a case and analyze it from 500 different angles. Somebody comes to two people and says, I stole from one of you. I don't know which one I stole from you. I don't know if it's you. I don't know if it's your father. I don't know if it's you. I don't know if it's your son. I don't know. What do you do in that case? Who wants to return an object, doesn't know who he stole from. Okay. And they're going to debate it for pages and pages. And you know how long it takes to get through these pages? Like, what am I doing over here? You know, I'm not stealing. If I steal, I'll know who I steal from. Like, this is not helping me in life. You're going to tell me cases, if you open up a pit in a public space and somebody falls in, what's your liability? Oh, if somebody falls in, that's one case. What if an animal falls in and it's somebody's animal and that cow broke his leg? Dude, I'm not opening up pits. I don't plan on ever doing it. If I do, a horse is not going to fall in. Like, just, what am one thing, spending a half hour on it. You know, when I was in shoot, we could spend weeks on just talking about the pit and the animal. Like, what are we doing over here? But this is what Jews do. And like, why do we do this? Listen, if you want like practical Jewish law, there are books, the codes, called the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. Okay, this is it. You can read it and you get the bottom line. There's later books which also, like, you want to learn Jewish philosophy, okay, there's a book for that. But studying Talmud is a very raw type of study. And if you're looking to like get something out of the study, it's not going to work. Like, you study for the sake of study. Why in the world are you studying this? It's like a value in and of itself. Why did you study the Talmud? It's very weird. I've heard this from many people. They tried maybe once or twice joining a Talmud class. They just gave up. They just can't get it. It's so confusing. And it's basically, what do you want? Like, what are we trying to get to? And it's even like not meaningful to a point. Now, it is meaningful. It is meaningful. The problem is that there's a very strong learning curve to the style of Talmud and understanding how the development is. Even what I just told you today, how, you know, it's a dynamic system and how it all comes together, that itself clarifies so much for learning Talmud. But it's a very hard book to understand what's happening over here. And most important is, it's a book that is studied not because, okay, today my life is going to be enhanced because I studied this. It's a book which is studied for no other purpose other than just to study it. Not because I'm going to be helped by it, not because I'm going to be smarter because of it, although maybe you will be smarter than it. You know, they say that studying Talmud really sharpens the mind. Could be. But the only way to study Talmud is for the sake of studying Talmud itself. And the question is like, why? Why did Jews do this? Well, one answer which is given very often, is in text 11 of the books, is this value. This is from the Mishnah, from the tractate, from the Ethics of Our Fathers, the Pirkei Avot. Text 11, page 21. And it says, study is not the principal goal, but rather the action. Why are we studying Talmud? It's like that we can know what to do. Okay, some people say that. It's a bad answer. It's a bad answer because there's much better books if you want to know what to practically do as a Jew. If you want to know what Jewish law is, there's straightforward books that lay everything out very succinctly, very directly, But the Talmud is, most Talmud study is not practical per se. It's discussions, debates about things which practically, I'm not connecting to it. And we'll take an 11-year-old boy or a yeshiva boy, and we'll sit them for hours. I remember when I was in yeshiva, I was 17 years old, learning here in Detroit. 16, 17. We spent 7 hours a day studying Talmud. What tractate were we learning that year? It was tractate Ketubot, which is about marriage and marriage contracts. You want to know what we spent the first few weeks of yeshiva studying? Ready for the topic? The opening mission of the tractate of Ketubot. If a man sends a messenger to betroth a woman upon his behalf, and he doesn't come back alive, and we don't know, did he die before he betrothed the woman, or did he die after? Is this man married now? Now, guys, this is not a simple question to answer. This is weeks studying the whole. Dude, if I get married, I am not sending anybody else. Like, you know, just it's not like. But this is the process of studying Talmud. Why do we do it? And the answer is, I want to share this with you in the next 10 minutes. This is the ultimate reason. And I want to introduce this very important and deep idea with you with an opening text. Text 12 is a fascinating text because it was only found recently in the archive of the Russian government, and post the falling of the Iron Curtain, and the archives of the Russian authorities for hundreds of years were all of a sudden made public. We found this. In the late 1700s, the founder of the Chabad movement, the great Rebbe, his name was the Alter Rebbe, Rebbe Shneur Zalman of Liadi, he was arrested by the Tsarist government. And there's a whole history. Why would they arrest a religious leader, not because of criminal activity, but on religious grounds? They arrested him on religious grounds. They basically, the Tsarist government, the Tsarist authorities wanted to really keep religion on a tight lid. Like they wanted to govern religious practices. And because of that, they arrested him to interrogate him for a few weeks on the current state of Judaism, on the emergence of this new movement of Hasidism, and they really grilled him in debates. And they arrested him. They kept him under arrest, and then a few weeks later, they let him free. Okay. Now, we never knew what those interrogations were because we just didn't have record of them. The Tsarist government didn't give it to us. Communist government for sure not giving it to us. But all of a sudden, it became public just a few decades ago. This is one of the questions. They asked him, what is the religion? What is the divine worship of your religion? This is what they asked him. And this is what he answered. You ready, Anna? Text 12. It's actually interesting. We have a little bit of Russian here for you. Page 23, text 12.
Okay. That which we refer to in our Russian language is, but I don't understand what is the Boga.
Boga, God.
Boga, молиться.
Is that a real word?
Молиться. Like pray.
Praying. So what's praying to God?
Divine service is divided by all of us Jews into two parts. The first is the reading and the studying of the scriptures, Talmud, Midrashim, and their
commentaries,
as well as the study of the legal code that summarize the laws of the Talmud. The record aspect of the concept of prayer.
Okay. It's a very peculiar text. They ask him, what is the divine worship? That's what melitza means. The English translation here is not good. The English translation is divine service. It really means divine prayer. What's divine prayer? And he says, divine prayer in Judaism is two things. Studying Torah and praying. What? What's prayer? No, prayer is not just prayer. Studying Torah itself is divine worship, is divine prayer. We study Talmud, the commentaries. So you don't pray studying Talmud. You open up your head and you sit down and you grill yourself and you try studying it. Judaism, studying Talmud is not just something recreational. It's not just interesting. It's not even just we want to be smart. And by the way, Judaism is the only religion in civilization that makes the study of the religion in and of itself a value, a religious practice. No, most other religions tried not getting their people to not study the material. Okay, including Islam and Christianity until the Reformation. Okay, but in Judaism, from day one, Judaism is actually we are the inventors of public school, free education for all Jews. No Jewish child shouldn't be able to study Talmud. It's in the Talmud, public school. Okay, just very interesting. This is a religious practice. We're doing this because this is a deeply spiritual, godly act. What's godly about it? Dear friends, this is the idea in brief. In Judaism, and as being a Jew, one of the key parts of Judaism is making a bond with God, a connection with God, a relationship with God. There's only one very big problem for that. Where do you find God? I'd love to do it, just never met him, never found him. Where do you find God? God is infinite. God is unknowable. God is too big for you to make a relationship with. How do you make relationships with God? So God says he gave to us a Torah. When God gives to us a Torah, number one, this is divine wisdom. This is what God wants. Which means you could go and study what American law says, what another civilization's law says about something. But when you study what this says, this comes from God. But even more than that, the Talmud tells us that when God gives a Torah, he embedded himself, he wrote himself down into the Torah. Like a godly feature, which basically means if I write a book, I can't give you myself in my book. I could give you thoughts that I thought of in my book. So authors are not sharing themselves. They're sharing ideas they thought of. But God gave us a Torah, and he literally put himself into the Torah. And what's the Torah? Some of the Torah is too deep to understand, like Kabbalah. Could you understand it? Not necessarily. But the Talmud, and especially Jewish law, is very, very, very logical. There's a very intellectual side of Torah. The beauty of intellect is that you can understand it. And when you understand something, it becomes embedded into your psyche. When you understand something, once you understand something, it becomes part of you, just like when you eat food. When you eat food, you chew it down, you digest it, and it's metabolized within your body. It becomes you. So when you heard 2 + 2 = 4, at the beginning you didn't know the logic of it, but at some point it clicked. Oh, 2 + 2 is 4. And the moment you understood that, it became a part of you. It integrated into your very psyche. So God gave us a mode of how not just we could pray to him, but we could get a very deep bond with him, and that is by intellectually eating up anything that we can understand of Torah. Let's read text 13. This is a powerful text from the Tanya, the key Hasidic text. I'm going to read it to you because it's a tough text over here. Let's read it. Text 13, page 24. Halacha, Jewish law, is God's wisdom and will. For so it arose in God's will that if, for example, Reuben pleads in one way, and Simon comes and he pleads in another way, the verdict should be such and such. This is what God wants. Now, it is possible that this particular litigation never occurred in reality, which means you could learn something in the Torah, and not just it's not practical to you, it never ever happened. Nor is it ever destined to be presented for judgment as these precise disputes and claims. This is a case the Torah tells us it's never going to happen. Nevertheless, God's will and wisdom has determined that in the event of a person pleading this way and the other litigant pleading that way, the verdict shall be such and such. It's not about practicality. It's that this is what God is sharing with us. So accordingly, let's continue reading. Accordingly, when we study and understand and properly comprehend with our intellect the details of such a scenario in accordance with the law presented in the Mishnah, in the Gemara, or Poskim, which are the later codes, we have thereby comprehended, grasped, and encompassed with our intellect the will and wisdom of God. We have effectively understood something of the one whom no thought can grasp, and whose will and wisdom are beyond understanding, until they are invested within the laws that have been set out for us. When we study Talmud, what we're really going for is not, do I agree with this? Is it enhancing my life? Or is it even practical? Do you know the Talmud discusses certain cases? And the Talmud itself tells you, this, by the way, this case never happened and never will happen. Talmud itself tells you, so why are we discussing it? Move on with life. No, let's discuss it. Because it's part of Torah. And Torah is not just there for the utilitarian use, it's there because God is sharing with us a piece of himself. And I could sit there and discuss it and analyze it and even debate it within my own head until I understand it. And say, I got it. And when you get that, you just swallowed God. Meaning, you have a deep bond with God. And that's what makes your soul on fire. That's the bond that a Jew gets with, that a Jew could have with God, by studying Torah. So when we sit down to study Talmud, I'm going to put this up over here. Right? Studying is intellectually grasping. Torah is God's will and wisdom. So the study of Torah is intellectually grasping God's will and wisdom. We're grasping it. We're taking it in. We're eating it up and making it a part of us. And now we are walking around with a little piece of God inside of us, with that fire, with that warmth, with that energy, with that holiness. When we study 1 hour of Talmud, we're not just sitting down to study 1 hour of Talmud, of teachings. It's an hour spending with God, which is why Jews found comfort in it. Jews were going through the most difficult times in Jewish history, stressed and hurt and beaten. But where do we find comfort and solace? And it was in the Talmud, in the teachings of God. And dear friends, that is what we're here to do. To try to understand what is in the Talmud, to give us a little bit deeper of an understanding and try to decode it. And dear friends, if you're rushing out, then the class is officially over by now. So, next week, number 1, we got lesson number 2, where we'll really, break the surface and really start getting our feet wet with the actual substance of the Talmud. Next week is the Mishnah. Okay, I want to share with you a little music video, which I think is a very heartwarming video. It's like 5 or 6 minutes, and I think it really captures some of the beauty of the ideas we spoke about today. I have a critique on this video, which means this is a music video just made by some artist out in Brooklyn. I'm going to share it with you because there's something very warm about it. I don't like that it's absolutely male-centric and there's not a single female in the video. Okay. So if I was making the video, I wouldn't have done it that way. But it's a nice video nonetheless. So I want to share it with you if you would like. So you could sit back and enjoy this music video. Here we go. Ooh, but 1 second. Before I play it to you, this is very, very important. The key phrase in this song are the words in Hebrew. It's called Tanu Rabbanan, or like the Polish Yiddish pronunciation is Tuni Rabbanan. It's a little bit different. We would read it Tanu Rabbanan. They say Tuni Rabbanan. Okay. Tanu Rabbanan are the opening words of every single new conversation in the Talmud. And what it means is the rabbis have taught, which means we're always going to begin. And Tanu Rabbanan are like those opening words that mean that's it. We're starting a new journey over here. A new process is beginning. So those are the key words over here, Tanu Rabbanan.
Tuni Rabunan, Hasir, Me'akeves HaKorban, Hayam, Hayay, Divrer Meir, V'achachomim oimrim einoi me'akev, Mai Talmud Rav Meir, Hayay Biyom HaKro, Lechaper B'nei Yisroel, Ma Kapor me'akeves, Tafshiro me'akeves, Ma Kapor v'ayay Ma'ashira v'ayay.
Mein Kind, sie willst die hören, die schönste Gesang auf der Welt.
Taten, Jumai, ja, ich will hören, die schönste Gesang auf der Welt.
Mein Kind, mein teuer Kind, ich will dir jetzt singen, die schönste Gesang auf der Welt.
Taten, Jumai, sing je für mir die schönste Gesang auf der Welt.
Sing mit mir, Tuni Rabbanan, haben die Rabbanan gelernt. Ja, Mama, Mama, ja, Mama, Mama, oi, Tuni Rabbanan, haben die Rabbanan gelernt. Ja, Mama, Mama, ja, Mama, Mama, in der Gesang hat man Tate gehört, für man seine jeden Tag. Wie hat gelernt, mit der Tnie Kurschein, mit einem Gesicht zu singen gesucht. Tuni Rabbanan, haben die Rabbanan gelernt. Ja, Mama, Mama, ja, Mama, Mama, Maya, Musai, Koirin, Shema. Ja, Mama, Mama, ja, Mama, Mama, Mama.
Mein Kind, mein lieber Kind, wie willst du hören, der heiligste Nigen auf der Welt? Liebe Taten, Juma, singe für mir, der heiligste Nigen auf der Welt. Sing mit mir, Tuni Rabbanan, hab die Rabbanan gelernt. Ja, Mama, Mama, Ja, mama, mama, mama. Du nir abunon, nir abunon gelegen. Ja, mama, mama, mama. Ja, mama, mama, mama. Mit dem Gesang macht's auch gelieren flassig, in ich dir in jeden Fahrtuch. In ich seh schon die Welt, ich will älter werden, lernen ich mit meinen Kindern lachen, ich so. Ja, mama, mama, ja, mama, mama, du nir rabunon, dir rabunon gelernt. Ja, mama, mama, ja, mama, mama,
Tijden zei ik de lieve tate, Kim slaap mij zingen, dem nikken vind ik gemoeren.
Jo, man teier kind, lo mir lernen in Water. Tu nid abunon, ja mama, 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 mama.